Us to discuss is Jonathan Houlihan, a commander in the U.S. Navy's Judge Advocate General's Corps Reserves. He's a veteran of both the Iraq and Afghanistan combat theaters and a designated expert in international national security and operational law. Good afternoon, Jonathan. So can I ask you, we know there were U.S. military forces in Venezuela. There were boots on the ground. Did Trump need congressional approval for this?
Absolutely not. President Trump has Article 2 authority to conduct these type of operations. Even under the War Powers Act, he can notify members of Congress on the HISI and the SISI in the Senate Arms Committee after the operation took place. So in this case, absolutely not. Article 2 authority is sufficient, and under his duty as Commander-in-Chief and Chief Executive to protect Americans. And the fact that it was such an interagency joint force, you had Department of Justice officials on scene. It was really pursued as a criminal matter because as the indictments from New York in 2020 showed that the conspiracy to commit narco-terrorism, providing weapons and cocaine through the FARC and the other narco-terrorism organizations. So absolutely not. He didn't require congressional authority for such a limited joint operation.
Okay, Jonathan, respond to this. Critics of President Trump's move point to the UN Charter. Did the U.S. violate the UN Charter, specifically Article 2, Section 4, that countries must refrain from using military force against other countries?
Well, with all due respect to the UN, I mean, I would submit to you that Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution trumps, no pun intended, the UN Charter, Article 2. So they can make those arguments, they can make those diplomatic kind of claims, but at the end of the day, Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution rules for American interest to make sure that Americans are protected from these drug running operations, working with the cartels, running drugs, getting around sanctioned activity, providing oil to sanctioned countries. All of those things to protect American interests trump any kind of Article 2 of the UN Charter.
Okay, so the administration says this is a targeted capture of an indicted criminal. We've heard that many times over the days. But some argue because Trump explicitly talked about taking over the oil sector in Venezuela and running the country, does that make it a regime change operation?
Well, certainly, if you look at what Secretary of State Rubio said and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Kane said, you know, that's more the official position as far as it was a criminal indictment. They went after Maduro because of these relationships with the FARC and these other narco-terrorist organizations, and he wasn't a recognized head of state. 50-plus countries, including the United States, did not recognize Maduro as the head of Venezuela because of the election irregularities and all of those other things that occurred. So he doesn't have this head of state immunity that he would allege under international law. So at the end of the day, the official position and how the operation actually occurred, Department of Justice, you had law enforcement officials on scene. So President Trump is handling the diplomatic efforts on the backside. Of course, there's going to be a ripple effect within Venezuela. Of course, the oil and gas industry needs to get repatriated to the world because of such problems they've seen with this socialist communist regime in place. So, of course, that is just a head of state trying to clean up the matter on the backside and really make these diplomatic talking points. But at the end of the day, the operation was done with a joint force, with criminal indictment in mind, and he was handed over immediately to law enforcement, and he was already made an appearance in court. So it's a legal process, not a military process, not a nation-building process.
All right, understood. Your comments as well on arguments that a country can't just seize leaders they deem as criminals. Maybe this could be classified as a concern as well, but they can't do that. Otherwise, any country could just do this.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly understand the argument. You know, being from Texas, having Santa Ana was seized on the battlefield from Sam Houston, again, Republic of Texas, not the United States. But these type of things have happened. Noriega in 1989, in Panama, very similar case. It's been talked about all over television, but a very similar case where a head of state can be taken, especially when they're not recognized as a head of state. By, like I said, the United States and 50 plus countries did not recognize Maduro as the head of state because of the election irregularities. So at the end of the day, he was a dictator, a criminal dictator that was taken for a law enforcement purpose because of the criminal indictments that existed since 2020, given the conspiracy to commit narco-terrorism, the weapons charges, the shipments of cocaine to Europe. I mean, the Europeans should be thanking us because we've cut off this large-scale drug operation that has been heading into Europe for years. But of course, they're going to make these kind of diplomatic talking points and say the United States had no right. But there's long precedent. There was a roadmap with Noriega. Even before that, in the Philippines, the United States conducted this type of operation. And there's strong legal precedent that any kind of head of state immunity, any kind of Article 2 under the UN, all of those things, they're not, in my opinion, it's not going to win the day for Maduro. I think he's going to be prosecuted, and I think he's going to spend the rest of his life in federal prison.
Okay, I just want to follow up on that. Are court proceedings and law any different when prosecuting a head of state of a foreign country like Maduro in the U.S.?
Well, I mean, that's the benefit of the United States. I mean, everybody should be treated equally. So, you know, he's going to have a right to a defense. There's going to be obviously increased security measures. You know, if you look at our own Department of Justice in the last administration, I mean, they prosecuted our former head of state, now head of state again. So it shouldn't be any different. There's going to be a lot more media. There's going to be a lot more media appearances, a lot more discussion and analysis. But at the end of the day, the process is the process, and we hope that it's the same process. Everybody has due process rights to make a defense, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay, you mentioned just now earlier in passing that he may be serving jail time. I just want to ask a final question on that. What happens if he's found guilty? What are the legal consequences for him? And what about his wife, Celia Flores?
Well, that's a good question. So his wife is obviously, they grabbed her too. So she's a conspirator. She's a in some manner, she's got evidence, a co-accomplice. So she probably will face the same kind of charges, or at least turn state's evidence against him to get a better deal. But at the end of the day, these charges are significant. And if you look at Noriega, I mean, I think he got 40 years, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but 30 or 40 years is what he was charged. He was released, and then he was under a separate criminal charge in France when he died in a Panamanian prison. So I expect him to spend the rest of his life in jail if he's found guilty and if these charges are proved. But I'm sure it will be a supermax, high security prison wherever he ends up if he's found guilty again. But the process is going to remain the same, other than, you know, obviously it's a bigger deal when you have a former head of state in a U.S. prison. But at the end of the day, the process is going to be followed.
Well, all right, Jonathan, it's always good to hear your insight. Thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Don. Appreciate it.
Chinese immigrants gathered outside the Chinese consulate in Los Angeles on Sunday to celebrate the arrest of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro. But the gathering took an